From the far reaches of the void where light itself grows cold, something stirs, ancient, vast, and utterly alien. They drift through space like a tide of flesh and bone, silent but unstoppable, their approach unseen until it is far too late. Entire worlds vanish beneath their advance, stripped clean of all life, as if they had never existed. The stars themselves seem to dim in their presence, as if recoiling from the horror that moves beneath them. They are not creatures of rage or revenge. They feel no sorrow, know no mercy. What drives them is not emotion, but a bottomless hunger, an instinct as old as the universe, honed to perfection. To them, we are not enemies. We are food, and like the crashing of a tsunami or the pull of a black hole, there is no reasoning with what comes. The Tyranids descend not in armies, but in waves, sinew, talon, and tooth. Each one is but a fragment of a greater whole, a single nerve in a colossal mind that stretches across the stars. This mind is no simple intelligence, but a godlike force of thought and will, known to us only as the Hive mind. It directs them with a terrifying precision, a singular purpose echoed in the silent screams of dying planets. Far beyond the rim of the galaxy, past the reach of human machines and psychic calls, lies the vast intergalactic void. For eons, it was thought to be lifeless, too cold, too dark, too distant. But the void was not empty. Something watched from that abyss. Something waited. When it came, it did not announce itself with fanfare. It arrived as shadows stretching across the stars, as planets going silent, as monstrous creatures erupting from the blackness between worlds. This is no ordinary threat. The Tyranids are not invaders in the conventional sense. They are an ecosystem, a biological force of nature, one designed for nothing but consumption. Their ships are not vessels, but living organisms. Their weapons breathe, bleed, and grow. Every clawed beast and slithering horror is crafted for slaughter, bred with an exactness that mocks even the finest human engineering. Wherever they go, they devour. Forests, oceans, animals, people, nothing is spared. The biomass of entire civilizations is rendered down into raw matter to create more of their kind. Planets once vibrant with life become barren husks, drifting tombs stripped of atmosphere and soul. And when the Tyranids leave, they do so only because there is nothing left to take. Though the Imperium has fought them for generations, and though countless lives have been lost in desperate resistance, understanding remains elusive. The brightest minds of the Magi biologists and Ordo Xenos continue to study these creatures, but their knowledge only grows more terrifying. The more we learn, the less we understand. What kind of mind designs a gun that feeds on its wielder's blood? What kind of predator fashions bullets from living organisms that explode into venomous spores? The Tyranids are not a race. They are a hunger-given form. Every fragment of their biology is a weapon, every instinct bent toward conquest. Some Tyranids adapt in seconds, mutating in real time to overcome enemy defenses. Others appear bred for one purpose alone, to kill in a very specific way. They do not build empires. They do not seek glory. They leave behind no monuments, only silence. This is the reality we face. The Tyranids are not merely another alien species. They are the end of all things, a devouring storm that will never stop until nothing remains. And still they come. Their numbers are without end. Their purpose is unchanging. And as the stars begin to fall into shadow, the question remains, how long can we resist the hunger that watches us from the dark? Each Tyranid creature is not a lone organism, but part of something far greater, an extension of a singular, terrifying intelligence that spans the stars. This alien force, called the Hive mind by human scholars, is not a leader in the traditional sense. It is not a voice or a command. It is a presence that permeates every creature under its control, guiding them not like soldiers, but like limbs of one vast and insatiable predator. This psychic network, woven through the minds of specialized Tyranid creatures, links every organism into one seamless whole. No words pass between them, no orders shouted across battlefields. Instead, they move as one, kill as one, think as one. Whether across mountains or between planets, the Hive mind's will is absolute. Even in the emptiness of deep space, its grasp does not loosen. What the Hive mind truly is no mind of the Imperium has yet understood. Theories have been written in blood and desperation. Some call it a god of evolution, others a psychic leviathan born from countless consumed worlds. But in truth, no comparison suffices. For the hive mind views the galaxy not with curiosity or malice, but with the cold hunger of a butcher at the market. To this intelligence, life is not a miracle or a rite. It is simply fuel. Civilizations, no matter how advanced or ancient, are seen as nothing more than herds waiting to be harvested. The hive mind does not negotiate. It does not hesitate. It devours. Since the first contact with the Tyranid threat, new hive fleets have continued to emerge from the dark beyond the galactic rim. Each one bears terrifying mutations never seen before, new horrors, new strategies, new instruments of extinction. These fleets twist and probe into the galaxy like the limbs of some colossal beast stretching out to seize its prey. Their path is always inward, always forward. Worlds along the edges of the galaxy vanish in silence. Entire sectors lose contact, falling into darkness without a trace. The first sign of their approach is not the roar of engines or the flash of battle, but a silence that spreads like a sickness. This silence is known as the shadow in the warp, a smothering psychic presence that strangles communication and disrupts minds long before the first spore touches the ground. Astropaths go blind. Psychic screams echo in the void. Panic grips the hearts of the unprepared as the storm draws near. Psychers suffer most of all. Their connection to the immaterium leaves them vulnerable, exposed. Some are overwhelmed by the shrieking alien presence and collapse in agony. Others lose their sanity, their minds unraveling beneath the pressure. Few survive long enough to warn others. Then the hive fleets arrive. Living ships, shaped like sea monsters from a nightmare, descend from the void and carve through orbiting defenses with ruthless ease. Planetary shields collapse. Gun batteries fall silent. Above the skies, the Tyranid swarm gathers. From the depths of these bioships come rivers of death. Winged beasts darken the heavens, spores rain from above, and the ground quakes with the advance of the swarm. Initial resistance is often fierce. Valiant defenders take up arms. Fighters dogfight above the clouds, and artillery blasts tear apart the first waves. But the Tyranids never come in just one wave. As more beasts pour forth, the defenders begin to break. The skies fill with fire, then silence. War machines are overrun, their crews shredded or digested. Fortress walls crumble. Soldiers become prey, then biomass. There is no retreat. There is no mercy. Even the planet itself turns against its inhabitants. The air thickens with toxins. Spores alter the ecosystem. Native life either mutates or dies. The very world is reshaped into something the Tyranids can consume more easily. Nothing is wasted. Every scrap of organic matter is harvested. Once the battle is over and resistance extinguished, the true feeding begins. Massive extraction tendrils plunge into the earth. The planet's life essence, its plants, animals, and people, is liquefied and drawn up into the waiting gullets of the hive ships. These ships drink deeply, growing stronger with every drop. When the feast ends, nothing remains. No oceans, no forests, no cities. Just a dead world, dry and hollow, a pale scar in the void where once there was life. The hive fleets drift away in search of their next meal, leaving behind only silence and dust. And still they come, from the dark beyond the stars, from places no one has dared to explore. They arrive. Their hunger knows no limits. Their evolution never pauses. Every victory we claim is temporary. Every battle won is just a moment of breathing space before the next storm breaks. For the hive mind is eternal, and it will not stop until all life in the galaxy has been consumed. The earliest known confrontation between the Imperium and the Tyranids unfolded on the remote world of Tyran Primus in the year 745, M41. It was here that humanity first glimpsed the scale of the threat, giving a name to what would become one of the most horrifying xeno-scourges in recorded history. From this blood-soaked ground, Hive Fleet Behemoth surged into the galaxy, carving a brutal path of annihilation through Imperial space. But whispers of contact with these aliens stretch back even further. No historian can say with certainty when the Tyranids first brushed against the edges of known civilization. Some reports suggest that both human explorers and the Eldar of Iyanden encountered a colossal alien construct on the jungle-choked world of Zephoria in the Tyranids system, possibly as early as the 35th millennium. This monstrous edifice stretched across an entire continent and pulsed with a psychic resonance, so violent it shattered Eldar minds, sending many into screaming seizures that ended only in death. Its composition, formed of hardened chitin and strange organic tissues, baffled all analysis. Attempts to approach it met with failure or madness. Within the shadowy halls of the Ordo Xenos, there are mutterings that these strange structures were not abandoned relics, but part of a long, deliberate plan, bioconstructs built by an early wave of Hive fleet Tyranids, waiting silently for a signal that has yet to come. Other reports from the Helican sector, dated to the 36th millennium, describe monstrous winged predators ravaging colonies with terrifying speed and precision, their forms eerily similar to what we now identify as the organisms of Hive fleet Ouroboros. Even before the Imperium understood the nature of the threat, the seeds had been sown. The genostealers that infested the moons of Imgul, once thought to be native creatures, are now recognized as the infiltrators of the Tyranid advance, scouting and preparing worlds for the arrival of their swarm. Some believe the Tau Empire has fought Hive Fleet Gorgon for generations, misinterpreting the ever-mutating biological horrors as random xenos, threats rather than components of a singular, coordinated intelligence. No one knows how many races have already fallen. Not all leave records behind. Civilizations swallowed whole by the Tyranids vanish into silence, their histories erased along with their people. Even ancient powers like the Necrons have encountered things they refuse to speak of. Whatever was seen, whatever was lost, the galaxy has yet to learn. Despite these scattered tales, it is the fall of Tyran Primus that remains humanity's first official entry in the ledger of war against this nightmare foe. For those who fight the Tyranids, that doomed planet marks the beginning of a slow, ongoing revelation, a truth that comes too late for many. The first signs went unnoticed. Deep space explorator teams, assigned to survey fringe systems, began reporting lifeless planets, entire worlds where nothing lived. No forests, no animals, not even the smallest microbe. Entire biospheres had been consumed and reduced to dust. The explorators logged their findings with mechanical efficiency, filing reports about mysterious dead planets as if they were cataloging star maps. In truth, these were the first planets stripped bare by Hive Fleet Behemoth, which had just emerged from its long slumber between galaxies. Depleted and starving, the Tyranid swarm initially targeted uninhabited systems, feasting in silence to gather the strength it needed for war. The explorators had no frame of reference. They saw the corpses of worlds, but not the predator that made them. The warning signs were ignored. The reports of lifeless systems were dismissed as curiosities, not threats. Had fate not intervened, the inhabitants of Tyran Primus would have been caught entirely unawares. But one survey vessel changed everything. It returned unexpectedly, its hull scorched, its systems damaged, carrying grim news from the edge of the system. The ship's crew described a field of strange objects, millions of them, drifting silently through space. At first believed to be meteors or derelict vessels, closer observation revealed something far more disturbing. These were not ships built by hand or machine. They were alive, vast, organic constructs moving with eerie coordination, converging toward the heart of the system. The survey vessel barely escaped with its warning. A few days later, the sky above Tyran Primus cracked open, and the Tyranids descended. Overlooking the storm-lashed archipelago of Tyran Primus stood a fortress unlike any other, led by the cold, calculating mind of Muggos Veranak of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Carved into ancient volcanic stone and reinforced by millennia of engineering, the outpost was built not merely to endure, but to repel anything the galaxy could hurl against it. With its vast shielded bastions and hurricane-proof bunkers, the base was thought unbreakable. Its defenders were no less formidable. The red-robed forces of the Mechanicus stood shoulder to shoulder with hardened Astra Militarum regiments. Fighter squadrons prowled the skies, while 4 massive planetary defense lasers, buried in fortress silos and sheathed in shimmering void shields, kept constant vigil. A web of autocannon emplacements and Proteus pattern bunkers completed a bastion of Imperial might honed by centuries of war. This stronghold had repelled Xenos raids, pirate fleets, and renegade uprisings across generations. But what approached from the void was something beyond reckoning. When Hive fleet Behemoth emerged from the black, its sheer scale dwarfed any previous threat. What came was not a fleet, but a tide of living extinction. As the first Tyranid bioships broke orbit, the defense lasers roared to life. Bright lances of burning light tore through the stormy sky, striking down countless alien vessels. For over an hour, the heavens blazed with fire, clouds boiling away under the fury of the defenders. But this was not a battle the Imperium could win. It was a test, and the swarm was learning. When the defense cannons reached critical heat and began to fail, the enemy vanished from the line of fire. Mugos Veranek, believing the attack repelled, sent his cruisers in pursuit. That decision proved fatal. Hidden within the thick clouds of drifting spores, the swarm had barely been scratched. Only a handful of bioships had been destroyed. The rest now encircled the Imperial fleet. What followed was not combat, it was massacre. Tendrils wrapped around hulls like serpents crushing prey. Boarding organisms burst through decks, flooding corridors with razor-toothed nightmares. Vessels were gutted from within, their crews either consumed or torn to pieces by beasts designed solely for slaughter. Within moments, the Imperium's spaceborne strength was shattered. The Tyranids returned to Tyran Primus with fury unrestrained. Myriad drop beasts, winged tyrannikites, plummeted from orbit, streaking through the clouds like fiery comets. Dozens were vaporized by laser fire, others shattered in the sea, but thousands made it through. The oceans themselves became battlefields, churning as alien monsters tore through native predators and launched themselves toward the bastion walls. The defenders fought back with grim resolve. Astra Militarum fire teams held their ground amidst the rain, unloading lost blasts and heavy bolter fire into swarming hordes. Gene Stealers and Hormagaunts were blown apart in droves, their bodies piling high in the mud. Through thunder and lightning, Imperial thunderbolts screeched across the sky, ripping apart descending pods in rapid passes. But the lines began to crack. The northern defense laser went dark first, clogged with the crushed bodies of thousands of gargoyles that had hurled themselves into its maw. The eastern gun followed as a monstrous carnifex, larger than any seen before, smashed its way inside and ruptured the coolant systems in a suicidal rampage. Vital infrastructure failed in a cascade of destruction. Spores choked engines. Harpies tore through fighter wings mid-flight. Ground emplacements fell silent as beasts overwhelmed every perimeter. Within minutes, Tyrannikites began landing directly atop the base. Fire and shrieks drowned out every command. The fortress, once a citadel of strength, now became a tomb of shattered steel and flesh. By the hour's end, the situation had collapsed. Defense systems were disabled or destroyed. Bunkers lay in ruin. Even the famed jungle warriors of Katakan, who had stood unflinching against demons and beasts alike, broke ranks and fled into the howling storm, searching for shelter in a world that offered none. Hope bled out onto the rain-slick stones. Some defenders still resisted, huddled behind shattered walls, led by officers too brave or too mad to surrender. They fought with bayonets and firebombs, knowing there was no rescue. One by one, these holdouts were found and silenced, their last moments consumed in darkness and blood. Only the command bunker remained, sealed beneath layers of ceramite and steel. And even that final refuge began to tremble, its reinforced walls groaning beneath the pounding fists of monsters bred to crush fortresses and butcher commanders. The heart of Tyran Primus had begun its last desperate beats. From the shattered depths of his command center, Mugos Veranax watched chaos unfold through flickering data screens. The alien swarm had breached the fortress, tearing through his world like wildfire. Walls collapsed. Defenders fell. Each second, the enemy crept closer. When the bunker's adamantine gate finally burst inward with a thunderous crack, the true nightmare began. Skitarii and guardsmen unleashed desperate waves of fire and phosphor. Promethium lit the corridor in sheets of flame, and globs of molten phosphex clung to alien hides. But the creatures did not burn or scream. They surged through the inferno, slashing, climbing, devouring. When the command center was overrun by a tide of razor-limbed horrors, Varanax offered a final binary prayer and activated a hidden control beneath his console. Deep beneath the crumbling bastion, a data codex dropped into the Earth's core on a magnetic rail, vanishing into the darkness before the aliens reached him. That codex held the last record of Tyrant Primus, and though its creator died moments later, his final act ensured the warning would live on. The world's fate might have been lost forever, if not for the man who arrived months after all hope had been extinguished. Inquisitor Kryptman found only a corpse of a planet. Once a world of oceans and storms, Tyrant Primus had been reduced to a lifeless husk. The atmosphere was dry and sterile, the oceans gone, the surface carved with deep scars where entire continents had been consumed. The biomass had been devoured, right down to the bacteria in the soil. It was death perfected. Recovering the buried codex from the ruins, Kryptman studied the autologs and battle footage in stunned silence. He learned the full scope of the destruction, and more terrifying still, he realized it had not been a single-minded assault, but a calculated, coordinated harvest. With grim urgency, he raced to alert the Imperium from this world. He gave the enemy a name, the Tyranids. From that moment, the Tyrannic Wars began. The first sightings were only the beginning. What had been a single invasion evolved into a galaxy-wide calamity. Hive fleets, each a tendril of a far greater intelligence, pierced deeper into inhabited space. Every world they encountered became another test. Every war a lesson. The Tyranids were learning, adapting faster than their enemies could respond. Each Hive fleet came with its own method, its own monstrous signature. Some traveled with bloated bulk and brute force. Others slithered in silence and struck from shadow. But they all shared a core design. Towering Hive ships, vast bioforms the size of cities, drifted through the void like grotesque leviathans. Their bodies were plated in thick layers of chitin, grown to endure the brutal cold of deep space. Their shapes varied wildly. Some bristled with spines and feeder tendrils, others pulsed with internal lights and biological sacs. Tentacles trailed behind them like the arms of a cosmic Kraken, capable of wrapping around warships and reducing them to wreckage in seconds. Fanged maws and siphon-like proboscises yawned wide, devouring anything with mass, whether steel, flesh, or stone. And from these ships came the true threat, not the vessel itself, but the endless tide of life it carried. Deep within their pulsating hearts lay chambers of reproduction, where warrior organisms were birthed in ceaseless waves. The walls of these monstrous wombs pulsed with fluid and nerve, each beat spawning a new terror to unleash upon prey worlds. Those who have returned from inside a Hive ship speak of nightmarish bioterrains, corridors of muscle and bone, flashing with electric pulses from massive synapse nodes. Norn queens slumber in vast organ chambers, their minds stretching across light years to direct entire fleets. Sentry beasts race through organic tunnels, and walls part like living things to unleash sudden ambushes from unseen angles. Lumbering bioengines known as Tervigons wade through the internal passages, their swollen abdomens birthing hunter creatures by the dozen with every breath. Every movement is part of the Hive's living purpose, and beyond them all lie the beasts of apocalypse, colossal biotitans sealed in biostasis, awaiting only the signal to descend. When a Hive ship opens its ventral hatches, what pours forth is not an army, it is extinction. From the smallest termagant to winged gargoyles and shrieking harpies, from the nimble lictors to towering carnifexes and beyond, the swarm spreads like fire. One Hive ship alone can level entire fleets of defenders before the first creature even touches ground. This is the future Tyrant Primus foretold. A future where no world is safe, where each victory buys only a moment of time, and each defeat feeds the hunger of something vast, calculating, and impossibly old. The galaxy now understands what Varanax died to warn them of. But the question remains, can it act before the hunger returns? Hive ships are rarely seen alone. More often, they arrive in colossal swarms, living armadas stretching across the stars, filled with pulsating leviathans and their endless cargo of monstrous spawn. When such a force descends upon a star system, entire planets can be stripped bare of life within weeks. Oceans vanish, forests crumble, populations disappear beneath the tide. In a desperate effort to categorize and study these nightmares, Imperial xenologists have assigned names to the various Hive fleets. These labels, though perhaps a futile attempt to humanize the incomprehensible, do offer insights into the different traits and tactics used by each swarming force. Each fleet carries distinct signatures, biological markers, and strategies that set them apart, as if the Hive mind itself experiments with new formulas for galactic slaughter. Coloration is one of the most obvious traits used to distinguish between them. Behemoth's creatures often bear hues of deep indigo and violet. Kraken spawn blaze in shades of crimson, while Leviathan's organisms display ghostly purples and pale grays. Whether this serves a tactical purpose, such as identification or psychological manipulation, remains unknown. Some scholars argue it aids coordination between creatures. Others suggest it's designed to terrify, or perhaps it is nothing more than an evolutionary flourish without true meaning. More unsettling are the ways in which each fleet approaches the hunt. These are not mindless beasts. They are the tools of a sentient force learning and refining its methods. Jormungandr favors attacks from below, releasing serpentine horrors to tunnel beneath cities and erupt in coordinated ambushes. In contrast, Gorgon specializes in biological warfare, drenching battlefields in clouds of spores and venomous mists that rot lungs and melt flesh from bone before a single claw is raised. Some Hive fleets rely on brute strength, stampeding across continents with herds of living tanks. Others strike from above, blinding the skies with clouds of winged predators. There are fleets that focus on stealth, dispatching camouflage stalkers capable of infiltrating strongholds and assassinating leaders before the battle even begins. The Hive mind tests every tactic, every weapon, adjusting and evolving with terrifying speed. Worst of all is their adaptability. No two engagements with the Tyranids are ever the same. A weapon or strategy that works brilliantly in one battle may be utterly useless in the next. They observe, they analyze, and they change. The defenders who believe they are prepared often find themselves outmaneuvered before the first shot is fired. Tank-destroying rounds that once shredded monstrous bioforms to pieces now bounce harmlessly off newly hardened carapaces. Air squadrons that once delivered death from above are torn from the sky by swarms of flying beasts bred specifically to counter aircraft. Chemical weapons, perfectly tailored to dissolve Tyranid tissue in one campaign, fail to affect the next wave. Its genetic code already rewritten to resist. Every battle with the Hive mind is a test. Every failure a lesson. But the only side learning is the enemy. For the defenders of the galaxy, each confrontation feels more hopeless than the last, not because they fight poorly, but because the Tyranids never fight the same war twice. More disturbing than their ability to adapt in battle is how the Tyranids appear to share their knowledge across space. Even when Hive fleets are separated by light years, mutations and tactical improvements seen in one will soon emerge in others. No one truly understands how such vast coordination is possible, but its implications are terrifying. It suggests a form of memory that transcends distance, a unified intelligence that learns from every engagement, no matter where it takes place. Even when a Hive fleet is seemingly destroyed, the nightmare rarely ends. Stray organisms slip into hiding, slinking into the wilds of planets or drifting unseen into the void. These remnants might vanish for decades or even centuries, but when they return, they bring devastation once more. Whole worlds, thought cleansed and safe, are torn apart anew by a threat no one expected to rise again. When fragments of a shattered Hive fleet survive and escape, they don't fade, they evolve. These remnants become what the Imperium calls splinter fleets, smaller but no less dangerous. Hidden from the gaze of their enemies, they consume biomass in silence, growing stronger and learning from past defeats. When they emerge once more, they bring new horrors, forged from experience and adapted to overcome previous resistance. The pattern is unmistakable. The Tyranids don't forget. They don't just return, they return better, stronger, smarter, and they're never truly gone. But even before their claws reach the surface, the Tyranids bring destruction through other means. The arrival of a Hive fleet casts a dark veil across the stars, a psychic blight known only as the Shadow in the Warp. This invisible storm stretches for vast distances, blanketing entire systems in a choking silence that cuts off communication and warps the minds of those caught within its reach. The warp itself, a dimension of raw, chaotic energy, is essential to life among the stars. It fuels the powers of psychers, enables faster-than-light travel, and forms the backbone of communication between distant worlds. For all its danger, the warp is a necessary gamble, a cosmic ocean that makes civilization possible. But the Shadow in the warp poisons that ocean. When the Hive mind moves, the warp falls still. Psychic signals are drowned in static. Astropaths go blind or mad. Navigation becomes impossible. Entire systems are plunged into darkness, each world alone, unaware of the fate of its neighbors, left to fend for itself against the oncoming storm. To those attuned to psychic forces, the Shadow is agony. Human psychers suffer migraines and hallucinations. Eldar seers scream in terror, their minds cracking under the pressure. Even the Orc's strange, latent psychic instincts are disrupted, driving them into frenzy or fear. Panic spreads like wildfire. Prophets of doom flood the streets, and terror takes root before a single bioform has landed. This psychic suffocation is not merely an accident of the Tyranid's presence, it is a weapon. One more tool in the Hive mind's arsenal. It severs prey from hope, blinds defenders, and crushes morale long before the first attack. While the defenders reel in confusion and dread, the swarm prepares to strike. And when it does, the galaxy will once again be reminded that nothing can hide from the hunger of the Hive. For many, the first sign of the Tyranids' approach is not a sound or a sight, but a creeping fog inside the mind. Thoughts become sluggish, tangled like vines in a storm. Some describe it as an invisible static that scrapes against their consciousness, a mental weight pressing down until even speaking feels like a struggle. Others feel haunted by whispers and shrieks that don't come from any mouth, as if a billion unseen creatures were clawing at their sanity. The truly cursed are those with psychic gifts. To reach into the warp while the Shadow hangs overhead is to risk destruction. Minds rupture under the pressure, veins burst behind the eyes, and skulls crack from within. Even the most powerful psychers must fight tooth and nail to spark a flicker of their abilities, knowing full well that it may be their last act before madness or death claims them. For astropaths, the situation is even more dire. Attempting to cry out for help through the psychic haze is like screaming into a vacuum. Their voices are swallowed whole, and most die in agony, blood leaking from every orifice as their desperate signal is choked off before reaching the stars. Navigators fare no better, blinded by the silence. Their guiding minds collapse under the weight of the Shadow, sending ships veering into the abyss or crashing headlong into planets. This is why most Imperial worlds overrun by the Tyranids never get the chance to call for aid. They face the swarm alone, unheard and unseen, as the universe rushes on without knowing they are already gone. The silence becomes a tomb, and their last moments are lost to history before they're even lived. Other species suffer in their own way. The Eldar, so deeply entwined with the warp, find themselves nearly paralyzed. Their foresight turns dark, their senses clouded by psychic agony that stabs at their souls. To be near the Tyranids is to walk through fire for them. Every second a torment of mental resistance, their ancient gifts rendered useless when they need them most. Even the powers of the warp's most twisted wielders falter. Sorcerers of the darkest cults, those who command demons and call storms with their minds, find their rituals fizzle to nothing. Curses vanish from their tongues, and prayers to their foul gods are left unanswered. The Shadow doesn't care for allegiance. It strangles all equally. Only a few, like the Necrons and the Tau, seem to weather it better. Devoid of psychic presence, they remain untouched by its psychic grip. Yet even they are not immune to the Hive mind's reach. The Tyranids don't need to hear your thoughts to destroy you. They only need time, and they always find a way in. What is more horrifying still is how the Hive mind begins to mirror the powers of those it consumes. Creatures begin to appear among the swarms, manifesting abilities that resemble the psychic might of other species. What starts as a strange mimicry soon becomes deliberate warfare. No one is certain how they do it. Some believe these beasts channel warp energy itself, though without relying on the warp in the traditional sense. Others argue that the synaptic currents of the hive mind generate a psychic force of their own, one born not from emotion or belief, but from cold, perfect instinct. Energy surges through the nervous systems of these organisms and is released in ways no natural creature should survive. Shields of glimmering force spring into being. Blasts of pure agony ripple through battlefields. Screams echo not from mouths, but from inside the skulls of their victims. And with every encounter, the swarm grows more refined, more precise, more lethal. For those on the front lines, these theories mean little. There's no comfort in the idea of scientific understanding when your comrades are screaming and the sky burns with bioplasma. The only truth that matters is this: the Tyranids can break your body, unmake your mind, and do so not with cruelty, but with purpose. You are prey, and they are the perfect predators. The more the galaxy's scholars dig into the mysteries of the Tyranids, the deeper their confusion grows, especially when it comes to how these alien horrors interact with the warp. On the surface, the Tyranids seem almost disconnected from it, as if the strange energies flowing through the Imperium barely touch them. Yet, records show whole splinter fleets disappearing into warp storms, only to reappear in completely different corners of the galaxy, emerging from other, equally bizarre warp phenomena. Tendrils of these fleets have been known to break through directly into civilized star systems, unleashing chaos without warning. Investigators from the Order Xenos and elite Death Watch squads have uncovered chilling evidence that the Tyranid threat doesn't just end with their physical arrival. Among the most dangerous are the Gene Stealers, twisted creatures that infiltrate ahead of the main swarm by hiding aboard Imperial ships or slipping into human worlds unnoticed. Since the grim revelations on Gosha Quintus, it's become clear that Gene Stealers are more than mere hunters. Their most sinister gift is a parasitic curse that infects abducted victims, binding them under the Gene Stealer's control. Entire populations become unwilling members of cults born from this infection, living in the shadows of Imperial worlds, waiting for the moment when they erupt into violent uprisings from within. Adding to the terror, some believe these cults emit a psychic signal, a haunting beacon broadcast across the stars. No matter how skilled the psychers or magi, no one has yet unraveled its true nature or meaning. But what is undeniable is that the Hive fleets can sense this dark call, using it to track down new prey worlds with ruthless precision. This twisted fusion of human minds corrupted by Tyranid influence hints at nightmares still lurking beyond the horizon. When a Tyranid invasion finally unfolds, it is a scene of overwhelming dread. Toxic clouds blacken the skies, and monstrous swarms pour down from their Hive ships, spilling over planets like a living flood. Wave after wave of ravenous beasts sweep across the landscape, leaving destruction and death in their wake. Yet, beneath the chaos, a terrifying order reveals itself. Each Hive fleet operates with its own unique hunting style, but most follow a grimly similar blueprint. The Tyranids launch successive attacks, adapting the forms they spawn based on the defenses they face and the condition of the planet. Their tactics shift with cold efficiency, both on the ground and in the space above, as they methodically wear down resistance and prepare the world for consumption. The terrifying dance of predator and prey plays out with terrifying precision, showing that these alien invaders are far from mindless beasts. Their instinct is matched by a chilling intelligence, one that learns and evolves with each battle, ensuring that no defense is ever permanent and no victory is ever guaranteed. The horror begins quietly, with subtle probes meant to weaken the defenses of the target world. Some of these vanguard creatures may have been lurking in the shadows for months, even years, before suddenly launching their assault. Lictors and Gene Stealers move like ghosts in the night, sabotaging supply lines, assassinating leaders, and spreading chaos among terrified civilians. Meanwhile, waves of living invasion craft descend from the skies, unleashing a flood of monstrous swarms. Though many of these bioships are shot down by planetary defenses and aerial fighters, a significant number reach the surface, splitting open to pour out endless waves of expendable creatures. Driven by synapse-linked commanders like warriors, tervigons, and hive tyrants, torrents of termagants and hormagaunts rush forward, battering anything in their path. Their mission is not outright conquest, but to exhaust the enemy, tearing through fleeing armor and isolated garrisons to weaken resolve and resources. Overhead, flocks of thousands of gargoyle-like creatures patrol, supporting the ground forces and keeping pressure relentless. This opening barrage helps the hive mind to herd the defenders, drain their ammo, and identify the strongest points in their lines. Once these battlefronts are clear, the next waves adjust in response to the resistance encountered, becoming more focused and lethal. If the defenders retreat into underground bunkers or fortified compounds, the Tyranids unleash swarms of tunneling beasts like trigons and molochs, ready to strike from beneath. Heavier biotanks such as carnifexes and exocrines smash through the toughest defenses, while the hive mind sends harpies, hive crones, and herodons to dominate the skies when aerial opposition is strong. For foes relying on psychic warfare, swarms of neurothropes and maleceptors arrive to break their minds, while toxic venom throats and toxicrines poison any survivors. One by one, the last bastions crumble, worn down by endless attrition or overwhelmed in brutal battles. When resistance becomes especially fierce, colossal biotitans like hierophants or hierodules march forth, monstrous engines of destruction capable of toppling even the mightiest war machines or heavily fortified strongholds. As the flames of conflict begin to die down, the battle transforms into a deadly game of cat and mouse, with scattered survivors desperately trying to flee or fight back. Unbeknownst to the defenders, a silent war rages beneath the surface, a microscopic battle twisting the very fabric of the planet's life. As invasion swarms assault the surface, the hive ships release thick clouds of hostile spores into the atmosphere, seeding the world with biological corruption. By the time the armies have fallen, the planet itself has been overtaken, its ecosystems warped and enslaved to serve the Tyranid horde. Grotesque towers of flesh and chitin erupt from the ground, grotesque spore chimneys pumping out dense toxic clouds that choke the atmosphere. Foul sporocysts drift down from orbit, accelerating the planet's transformation. Pools of bubbling, digestive slime the size of lakes gurgle hungrily, breaking down every trace of organic matter. Massive synapse nodes rise like towering fungi, amplifying the hive mind's control and deepening the shadow cast across the warp. Fungi. I find myself repeating the word over and over, fungi. It's almost maddening how often these fungal growths appear, everywhere and in unimaginable sizes. These giant structures serve as nerve centers for the hive mind, tightening its grasp over the conquered world and ensuring no hope of resistance remains beneath the crushing weight of the Tyranid invasion. Around the last pockets of resistance, bizarre and nightmarish biostructures rise like living nightmares. Jagged spires of bone and writhing nests of sinewy tendrils tear through fortifications and spread creeping parasitic infections, turning strongholds into grotesque nests of decay. These monstrous growths pulse with a dark life, reshaping the battlefield into a hostile landscape where nothing is safe. Meanwhile, the invasion's ravenous feeder creatures are relentless. From the very first moments, swarms of rippers, simple, voracious organisms, crawl and slither over the ground, feasting on the dead and dying without pause. Their numbers swell into the trillions as they gorge themselves across entire continents, then slither away into vast digestion pools where their biomass is broken down and recycled by the hive's insatiable hunger. Giant hero species lumber through the carnage, swallowing any who resist in whole, gorging themselves on corpses, and then disgorging their bloated meals into the digestive vats. Their sheer size and appetite are terrifying to behold, a brutal force that grinds the last vestiges of resistance into dust. Only when every flicker of defiance has been snuffed out does the final, most devastating phase of the invasion unfold. Above, the hive ships cluster in low orbit, clinging like parasites to the planet's surface, their biotowers piercing the atmosphere like grotesque veins. Through these conduits, the biomass from the slaughtered world and the dead of their own horde is siphoned up and consumed. The Tyranids tear apart mountains and dismantle fortresses in search of precious minerals, drain oceans until only cracked, lifeless plains remain, and consume every trace of organic life down to the microscopic level. Even the atmosphere is stripped away, leaving the world a barren husk, a lifeless shell drifting cold and empty in the void. Once the Hive ships have finished their grim harvest, they ascend into space, leaving behind only silence and desolation where vibrant life once thrived. Every weapon and tool the Tyranids wield is a living extension of themselves, grown organically within the depths of their Hive ships. Some are part of their own bodies, thick chitin armor, flesh that can change color to blend with surroundings, or sacs that release clouds of poisonous spores. Others are grafted symbiotically, fused to the creatures in nightmarish unions of flesh and function. To their enemies, the boundary between beast and weapon is nearly impossible to discern. Tubes pulse with venom, membranous wings lash out like blades, and grotesque growths twist and merge into lethal tools. Razor-sharp claws and jagged teeth are obvious, but even less conspicuous parts of their anatomy may hide deadly surprises: poison glands, corrosive acids, hidden stingers, or writhing tendrils ready to lash out without warning. For those untrained in recognizing these horrors, doom lurks everywhere. Warriors have fallen after cutting off what seemed like the Tyranid's weapon, only to be struck down by concealed barbs or crushed beneath crushing tail clubs. The battlefield is a maze of peril, where every movement might trigger a hidden trap, and survival depends on more than just steel and fire. It demands an almost supernatural awareness of the living nightmare they face. In reality, the line between a Tyranid creature and its weaponry is nearly meaningless. Both exist as parts of a single, living entity. Every Tyranid is essentially a walking arsenal, their bodies fused with organic technology so alien and adaptable that even the most advanced opponents struggle to keep pace. This fusion drags their enemies into a relentless arms race, one where most defenders fall hopelessly behind, overwhelmed by superior tactics, numbers, and evolution. Among the terrifying tools the Tyranids employ, some are particularly widespread across their fleets. Take the Devourer, for example, a weapon that looks like a grotesque barrel made from decaying flesh. Inside it wriggle countless tiny worms, which, when released by a bioelectric shock, surge into the enemy's body. These worms burrow mercilessly through nervous tissue toward the brain, causing unbearable pain and often driving their victims into madness before death. Larger Devourers launch even more horrifying brain leechworms, twisted mutations of this gruesome bioform. Another horrifying armament is the flesh borer, essentially a living burrow containing voracious borer beetles. Fired from the weapon, these beetles spring into action, clawing and chewing through their victims' flesh in their last moments. Flesh borers vary widely, from armored, piercing types to those drenched in incendiary fluids, known as torch bugs, which burn anything they touch. These living projectiles are as deadly as they are unsettling. Spine fists are equally nightmarish, grafted deep into a Tyranid's airways with thick, rubbery tubes. When activated, violent muscle spasms send bursts of pressurized air through these organs, launching sharp, barbed spikes coated in potent neurotoxins. Even a mere scratch from these spikes can be fatal, delivering a swift, agonizing death to anyone unlucky enough to be pierced. The swarm's weapons evolve constantly, blending brutal force, poison, acid, and even bioelectric shocks to dismantle prey in every conceivable way. Some Tyranids have evolved the ability to generate bioplasma, a searing energy that can reduce armored enemies to nothing but glowing ash. Their biological armory is vast, varied, and terrifying in its ingenuity. Among their close combat weapons, flesh hooks hide within the thorax of warrior creatures. These barbed hooks are fired with sudden muscle spasms, tearing through flesh and embedding themselves in victims. Connected to the Tyranid by sinewy cords, they can reel in trapped prey, dragging them into brutal close quarters where survival is nearly impossible. Another devastating weapon is the barb strangler. It begins as a small seed launched from a growth pouch, rapidly expanding in midair into a writhing mass of hooked tendrils. These tendrils lash out, gouging flesh, snagging weapons, and wrapping around throats in a vicious, constricting grip. Barb stranglers are especially lethal against lightly armored foes, or those who rely on masks and helmets for protection. Venom cannons add another layer of destruction, firing shards of crystallized acid wrapped in a metallic shell at extreme speeds. Even the lighter versions punch through decent armor, but the heavy variants unleash hypersonic projectiles that explode on impact with electrostatic charges, tearing through even the toughest vehicles like they were paper. These bioweapons leave nothing but ruin in their wake, a testament to the horrifying efficiency of Tyranid warcraft. The Impaler Cannon is a savage weapon that launches harpoon-like projectiles, capable of piercing even the thickest tank armor. Nestled at the base of each deadly missile is a parasitic shard beast that feeds on the fluids inside the projectile. When the cannon fires, this parasite's insides are violently ripped out, leaving it with fin-like appendages it uses to steer its dying body, guiding the shard straight into the target with terrifying precision during its final moments. Close combat is brutal with the Scything Talons, massive, razor-sharp claws wielded by many Tyranid warriors. These blades show no finesse, just raw power and relentless force. When swung, they carve through enemy ranks like a scythe, tearing and tossing mangled bodies with ease. The simplicity of the weapon masks its devastating lethality, as those who witness it know there's nothing subtle about the carnage it causes. Bone swords are crafted from dense, living chitin and have a small symbiotic creature embedded in the hilt. This tiny organism is responsible for repairing the blade if it gets damaged, growing the sword anew. Its web of nerve fibers runs along the weapon's length, transmitting the wielder's synaptic energy and creating a deadly field that drains life from anyone struck. This effect intensifies when paired with another bone sword, making dual-wielding warriors especially lethal. Rending claws are massive, organic talons sheathed in diamond-hard chitin, sharpened to a terrifying edge, backed by the power of Tyranid muscle and sinew. These claws shred through the toughest armor like paper. The damage they deal to flesh is catastrophic. One swipe can disembowel or rip out a throat in an instant, leaving devastation in their wake. The bone mace is a crude but brutal weapon seen mainly in the hands of towering carnifex creatures. Made from knotted bone, sharp chitin spikes, and sinewy tendons, this weapon is connected to its wielder by tough ligaments that contract like a whip, enhancing the power behind each swing. A single strike from the mace can smash through fortified bunkers, flip tanks, or pulverize any unfortunate opponent caught in its path. Spore mines are living explosives, either launched by specialized organisms called biovores or released en masse from Hive ships. These biobombs drift silently across battlefields, sensing vibrations with their delicate tendrils as they search for prey. When triggered, they explode violently, showering enemies with shards of chitin and sprays of venom, acid, or toxins, turning the ground into a deadly hazard. Each of these terrifying weapons showcases the nightmarish ingenuity of the Tyranid arsenal, blending biological horror with battlefield lethality. As we explore the various Hive fleets and their campaigns, we will see how these creatures have reshaped entire worlds through savage conflict and relentless adaptation. Hive Fleet Gorgon is infamous for its remarkable speed and uncanny ability to adapt. Unlike any other Hive fleet, Gorgon's forces evolve rapidly, sometimes even between waves of attack, continuously outsmarting their enemies. This relentless adaptability has led many prey species to their gruesome end, unable to keep pace with the ever-changing horrors. The Tau Empire has suffered most under Gorgon's relentless assault, enduring brutal campaigns that may have stretched across centuries. Though humanity's Imperium, the Greenskins, the Eldar, and numerous other alien races have all clashed with Gorgon, none have found lasting success. The fleet's reputation for swift evolution and deadly tactics has spread fear across the galaxy's eastern borders. Two grim truths have emerged from countless battles. First, Gorgon's ability to quickly modify its forces in response to enemy defenses is unparalleled, allowing it to exploit weaknesses with brutal efficiency. Second, its preference for toxic biological warfare is terrifying. Gorgon unleashes vast clouds of weaponized spores that drift through the air like silent killers, infecting anything they touch. These spores are not mere irritants. They penetrate even the most secure environments, seeping into lungs and bodies to unleash horrific infections. Victims suffer swelling organs and flesh that rots away from bone as self-replicating parasites multiply within. Amid the fog, venom-throated creatures lurk, their whip-like tentacles snapping out to strangle and poison, pumping deadly toxins to further weaken any resistance. Behind these sinister forms come the massive, lumbering green beasts known as melanthrotes, moving through the toxic haze like ancient monsters from a forgotten nightmare. They crush, trample, and tear apart any remaining defenders, supported by swarms of smaller creatures that scuttle relentlessly in their wake. Every organism in Gorgon's swarm carries toxin glands filled with semi-sentient spores, ready to adapt on the fly. As the battle drags on and more Tyranid creatures consume their prey, the spores evolve with terrifying intelligence. They analyze the genetic makeup of each fallen foe and transmit new adaptations through the hive mind, fine-tuning their deadly poisons. With each new wave, Gorgon's biological weapons become more lethal, turning even the smallest wound or contact with their skin into a death sentence. If the fight continues long enough, the enemy's forces simply dissolve, soldiers and warriors alike melting away as the spores ravage their bodies from within. This horrifying biological onslaught ensures that Hive Fleet Gorgon remains one of the most feared and unstoppable predators stalking the stars. These tactics have proven deadly effective, outstripping even the rapid technological leaps of the Tau and tearing apart the diseased resilience of plague marines aboard the corrupted hulk Vormnovarex. Gorgon's methods go beyond mere brute force, dismantling opponents that once seemed nearly invulnerable to biological warfare. As Hive Fleet Gorgon pushes deeper into Imperial territory, it focuses on agricultural worlds, seeking to spread its influence through vital food supplies. Early reports suggest that spores contaminated by Gorgon's invasion have infiltrated neighboring Imperial systems, turning harvested crops into vectors of terror and infection, a creeping nightmare for any who consume them. It is believed that Gorgon's consumption of the Tau, a species known for their genetic agility and rapid evolution, has granted the entire fleet an accelerated capacity for adaptation. This horrific inheritance has transformed the fleet's spores and bioweapons into ever more insidious killers, making them even harder to predict or counter. Hive Fleet Jormungand, also known as the Great Serpent, takes a markedly different approach. Preferring stealth and surprise, it moves through the shadows beneath the surface, striking suddenly and without warning. Its attacks rarely resemble the typical waves of assault seen from other Tyranid fleets. Instead of direct bombardments, Jormungand's hive ships linger in orbit, launching living projectiles encased in sinewy organic slings. These seemingly inert chunks of space debris carry deadly cargo, broods of mollusks and trigons that survive atmospheric entry and burrow deep into planetary crusts, initiating terrifying infestations. Once Jormungand establishes itself beneath the surface, monstrous bioabominations the size of battle tanks churn through subterranean tunnels, consuming everything in their path. The prey may catch faint signs of this looming threat. Mines fall silent, seismic sensors spike, and entire outposts vanish. Yet few grasp the scale of the terror growing beneath their feet. When the time comes, the Great Serpent strikes with overwhelming subterranean swarms. Hidden tunnels erupt with ravenous beasts that overwhelm garrisons and shatter defenses, consuming everything from fortified structures to crowded cities. Slowly, one world after another succumbs to darkness, swallowed from below. Even if defenders survive these assaults, the remaining Tyranids retreat deep underground, where they regroup and strengthen in hidden lairs. As the prey claim victory and begin to rebuild, the serpent waits patiently, ready to rise again and repeat its devastating cycle. Hive Fleet Kronos emerged as a response to the chaos unleashed by the Great Rift and the surge of demonic incursions. Unlike other fleets driven solely by hunger for biomass, Kronos has adapted its strategy to face foes that provide no nourishment, focusing instead on containment and cautious, calculated strikes. The warriors of Kronos demonstrate an unusual strategic restraint, conserving their strength for prolonged campaigns against incorporeal enemies. This shift highlights the hive mind's brutal efficiency, altering its tactics to confront threats that defy traditional methods of biological consumption and destruction. Hive Fleet Kronos is heralded by a unique and ominous presence within the warp, a shadow far more potent than that of any other known Hive fleet. Although this shadow affects a more limited area compared to others, its influence is devastating beyond measure. This focused darkness drains the very life force from psychically gifted foes, sapping their energy to empower the swarm, leaving behind nothing but empty, desiccated shells. Psychic powers falter and collapse beneath Kronos' oppressive veil, causing the most skilled warp users to weaken and vanish. Witnesses have even reported seeing warp rifts shrink or collapse entirely in the fleet's wake, as if demonic entities themselves were extinguished like flickering flames. Such claims, though, have been swiftly suppressed by the Inquisition, fearing the implications of this extraordinary warp phenomenon. When Kronos' forces engage, they prioritize ranged combat, rarely committing to close quarters unless certain of victory. The fleet's warriors are instinctively frugal with biomass, carefully conserving their resources, while their feeder organisms work tirelessly to recycle every ounce of dead Tyranid flesh with brutal efficiency. Many commanders have been caught off guard as their static defenses were methodically dismantled by precise barrages of living incendiaries, relentless organic artillery, and showers of razor-sharp chitin fragments. Kronos operates in a dark partnership with the tendrils of Hive Fleet Leviathan. While Leviathan swarms consume entire planets' biomass, Kronos' forces trail behind, feeding from these vast reserves to rejuvenate their strength. This grim cycle allows Kronos to maintain relentless pressure on its enemies, while also combating threats arising from the chaotic energies of the warp itself. Slowly but steadily, Kronos' tendrils have crept along the edges of the Great Rift, targeting worlds corrupted by chaos that might endanger the movements of other Hive fleets. They strike with deadly precision, like the tail of some colossal beast, before retreating to gather power and prepare for their next brutal assault. This ongoing campaign highlights Kronos' dual role as both a predator and a guardian against the warp's dark influence. It might seem tempting for prey races to view Hive Fleet Kronos as a potential ally against the forces of chaos, but such hopes are quickly shattered. Kronos' swarms relentlessly hunt vulnerable worlds, devouring biomass with brutal efficiency to fuel their unending war against their true foes. Their hunger shows no mercy, consuming entire populations without pause or pity. This fleet also shows a disturbing tendency to target psychic prey, whether it be Eldar craft-world sorcerers or human worlds racked by rampant psychic mutations. It remains uncertain if Kronos seeks to absorb psychic energy or to eliminate dangerous conduits for demonic invasion, but with the warp's influence growing stronger across the galaxy, this strategy signals a dark and unsettling shift. Hive Fleet Hydra initially appears less threatening, often trailing behind larger fleets, scavenging leftovers from their battles. This deceptive behavior lulls many into underestimating its true menace. But when Hydra strikes, it does so with shocking speed and ferocity, advancing rapidly toward the galactic core by following paths cleared by other Hive fleets. To sustain itself, Hydra scavenges aggressively, consuming not only conventional prey, but also the shattered remains of other Tyranid splinter fleets. It finishes off planets weakened by previous invasions, leaving no survivors to tell the tale. Mega xenobiologist Ekros van Zendrek has closely monitored Hydra's swift advance, carefully studying its tactics from the safety of his concealed survey vessel. Van Zendrek's observations reveal that Hydra's Hive ships maintain vast reserves of biomass, capable of rapidly spawning massive swarms with terrifying speed. This fleet also appears to absorb the genetic memories of fallen splinter fleets, learning from their predecessors' experiences to sharpen its own instincts. From a compact core, Hydra unleashes overwhelming invasion forces and formidable defensive organisms, all honed by countless battles. But Hydra's cunning does not stop there. Its reflexive threat responses and adaptive nature make it an especially dangerous adversary, able to evolve rapidly and strike unpredictably. The full extent of its menace is only beginning to be understood, and the galaxy may soon face the true fury of this relentless predator. When Hive Fleet Hydra begins its planetary invasion, Its Hive ships first deploy waves of warrior organisms to the surface. As these bioforms encounter fierce resistance and fall in battle, they release pulses of energy through their synaptic network. These signals guide the floating Tyranids, monstrous creatures that dive toward the battlefield, delivering fresh reinforcements exactly where their comrades have been killed. This relentless cycle means that killing one group of warriors only brings forth 3 times as many new foes, and those are quickly followed by even larger waves. The overwhelming numbers and unyielding assault eventually crush even the strongest defenses, leaving nothing standing in the wake of Hydra's seemingly infinite swarms. Hive Fleet Tiamat presents a stark contrast to most Tyranid incursions, specializing in defensive strategies rather than outright, all-consuming assault. This unusual behavior has puzzled and unsettled many of the galaxy's defenders. As investigations deepen, a growing sense of dread spreads among groups like Humanity's Ordezinos and the Seers of Craftworld Iandan. Some scholars within the Ordezinos suspect that Tiamat's vanguard has lurked within the galaxy since as far back as the 35th millennium. For centuries, they believe these Tyranids have been working in secret, gradually constructing a terrible bioengineered monument. Unlike other Hive fleets that spread far and wide, Tiamat's tendrils remain tightly coiled around its home system, biding their time. Until recently, Tiamat seemed almost inactive, only picking off isolated merchant convoys or devouring uninhabited planets. It is only when prey species attempt to purge or investigate these swarms that they face the true horror of Tiamat's forces. The warrior organisms here are among the toughest known, with armor harder than diamond and flesh that regenerates nearly as fast as it is torn. Their combat style relies on relentless waves that wear down defenders through sheer endurance. While individual groups may not withstand sustained onslaught, the overlapping attacks slow their advance long enough for encircling Tyranid beasts to trap them like the closing jaws of a massive predator. The cost of these battles is so high that many species hesitate to engage the fleet directly, often allowing it to grow unchecked. As Tiamat's presence expands, old fears resurface about a secret cult known as the Choir of the Void. These Genestealer worshippers emerge from planets across the galaxy, staging uprisings before vanishing aboard ships bound for Tiamat's heart. Their sacrifices provide gruesome offerings to the Hive fleet's insatiable hunger. Meanwhile, disturbing reports continue to filter from the Tiamat system itself. On the planet Zephoria, strange biostructures rise from the ground, pulsating with alien life. Psychers across the sector report an unbearable psychic scream emanating from the world, growing louder with each passing day. This has raised urgent questions among the galaxy's leaders. What dreadful purpose does this living structure serve, and what catastrophic fate awaits if it reaches completion? Hive Fleet Ouroboros strikes like a shadow in the void, unleashing swift and overwhelming assaults. Its warrior creatures darken the skies of targeted planets, swooping down with piercing cries to rip apart all resistance. The sheer number and ferocity of these winged bioforms leave devastation in their wake. Imperial xenobiologists and historians of alien lore suggest Ouroboros might be the oldest known Hive fleet. Ancient texts, some preserved in dust-covered archives and written by the long-forgotten Cardinal Miriamulus the Elder, describe a terrifying force called the Legion of Ouroboros. These winged horrors, ablaze with strange energies, once devastated worlds near Thracian Primaris, stripping them bare of all life. Inquisitorial expeditions have uncovered relics scarred by the bioplasmic weapons of Ouroboros, supporting these ancient records. Meanwhile, biologists point out the archaic simplicity of Ouroboros' organisms, which seem far less complex than the biomorphs fielded by fleets like Leviathan or Kronos. This primitive design hints at its immense age and endurance. Paradoxically, this simplicity is far from a weakness. Centuries of tactics honed against other Tyranid fleets prove ineffective against Ouroboros. Commanders who expect to exploit known vulnerabilities find their strategies failing, as these creatures lack predictable weak points or familiar genetic susceptibilities. Many defenders must abandon carefully crafted plans in favor of raw, brutal combat to survive the onslaught. Unfortunately, this harsh truth often dawns too late. Even when prey worlds adapt quickly, they face horrific battles as Ouroboros favors swarms of flying organisms, filling skies with endless clouds of gargoyle-like predators and deadly descending spores. Massive forms surge through these living storms of flesh and bone, colossal aerial beasts slicing through the shrieking swarms like ancient leviathans scattering frightened fish beneath dark ocean waves. The skies above prey worlds are choked with writhing wings, so dense they blot out the sun, plunging the surface into a grim twilight illuminated only by the eerie bioluminescent glow of Tyranid weaponry. Their attacks come with terrifying suddenness, focusing relentlessly on command centers and any sign of leadership, military or religious alike. Waves of clawed, screeching creatures collapse communication arrays under their weight, obliterate sensor networks in a frenzy of biting maws, and snatch messengers mid-transmission, tearing them to pieces before their calls for help can be heard. In this way, Hive Fleet Ouroboros systematically blinds its victims, severing lines of command and sowing confusion across entire planets. Trapped in a chaotic darkness, the defenders are reduced to little more than terrified mobs, driven down to the most basic instincts, struggling to hold on as the monstrous storm rages overhead. Terrified soldiers retreat to cramped underground bunkers, clinging to flickering light and the faint comfort of whispered prayers, only to be hunted relentlessly by swarms of creeping ground predators. These subterranean horrors flush out survivors, forcing them into the open where the skyborne swarms await with triumphant screams, extinguishing every last spark of resistance. The only race in the galaxy seemingly undeterred by Ouroboros' sky swarms are the orcs. Brutal and instinct-driven, orcs lack the discipline or structure to be hampered by the Hive Fleet's tactics. They welcome the clash with savage joy, thriving in the chaos and brutality of battle, and have managed to rout Ouroboros' swarms more than once through sheer ferocity and unrelenting assault. The Tyranid Wars and Hive Fleet Behemoth. Hive Fleet Behemoth was the first to be officially recorded by the Imperium of Man, its terrifying advance marking a dark new era. After obliterating the frontier outpost at Tyran Primus, Behemoth carved a relentless path through Imperial space, heading straight toward the Ultramarines' homeworlds. Driven by an insatiable hunger, the swarm seemed more a force of nature than a controlled army, rampaging and devastating without subtlety. The threat might have gone unnoticed if not for the efforts of Inquisitor Kryptman, who pursued Behemoth's wake and sounded early alarms that gave Ultramar precious time to prepare for the coming storm. Behemoth's relentless assault marked the beginning of the Tyranid Wars, a brutal campaign that tested the Imperium's resolve and tactics. The Hive Fleet's overwhelming numbers and brutal simplicity forced humanity to innovate quickly or face total annihilation. Though eventually repelled, Behemoth left a lasting scar on Imperial strategy and psyche, reminding all that the Tyranid menace was not just a distant threat, but a galaxy-spanning force capable of overwhelming entire star systems with unyielding ferocity. The relentless Tyranid invasion forced Ultramar to muster its most formidable defense forces, rallying entire void fleets to confront the menace. Despite this immense effort, these measures barely slowed Hive Fleet Behemoth's savage advance across star systems. The Tyranids swept through one planet after another, devouring every living thing to fuel their ever-growing hordes. Worlds once vibrant and lush, like the garden planet Prandium, were left barren and lifeless. The subterranean cities of Calf became slaughterhouses, echoing with the cries of the fallen. Yet it was at Macragge, the home of the Ultramarines chapter, where the decisive clash of the First Tyranid War unfolded, shaping the fate of the Imperium in that sector. Chapter Master Manius Calgar emerged as the Imperium's stalwart defender, commanding his warriors with unmatched skill and resolve. His forces engaged the Tyranid swarms in brutal, costly battles, striving to wear down the relentless invaders. Calgar himself suffered grievous wounds during the fierce combat at Cold Steel Ridge, struck down by a monstrous bioform known only as the Swarm Lord. The tide of battle turned when a combined assault by the battered Ultramarine Void Fleet and reinforcements from Battlefleet Tempestus shattered Behemoth's massive Hive ships above the ringed world of Circe. Simultaneously, on Macragg's surface, the tenacious ultramarine garrisons held fast in their polar fortresses, finally driving the Tyranid hordes back. Though victorious, the cost was devastating. The Ultramarines' elite First Company was nearly wiped out in the struggle, a loss that left a deep and lasting scar on the chapter's strength and morale. The remnants of Hive fleet Behemoth fled McCrag, yet splintered groups continue to plague Ultramar and the wider Imperium, their crude and brutal tactics a constant threat. Unlike the more cunning and subtle Tyranid tendrils that have appeared in later conflicts, Behemoth's surviving forces rely on sheer force. Reports from survivors speak of towering bioartillery creatures and vast swarms of lesser beasts that storm across battlefields like living battering rams. The Hive fleets orbiting Hive ships relentlessly bombard their targets, seeking to crush resistance before launching devastating ground assaults. After Behemoth's defeat, some Imperial analysts believed the Tyranid threat had been ended. They reasoned humanity had endured countless alien onslaughts over millennia, each fierce but ultimately isolated. Yet this hope was soon shattered as the shadow of the Tyranid menace loomed again, heralding the onset of the Second Tyrannic War. Centuries slipped by before the hope that the Tyranid menace had been quelled was cruelly shattered. The arrival of the Second Great Tyranid Onslaught, later dubbed Hive Fleet Kraken, marked a darker chapter in the ongoing war. Unlike its predecessor, this Hive fleet employed cunning and guile, spreading its forces into numerous tendrils that struck multiple systems simultaneously. By dividing its strength, Kraken extended its influence across vast swathes of space, casting a far-reaching shadow within the warp. This subtle approach meant the Imperium's response was slow and fragmented, allowing entire worlds to fall silently before alarms were raised. When the invasion became undeniable, humanity realized the grave threat it faced. Hive Fleet Kraken proved a master of ambush and maneuver warfare, often encircling prey with relentless precision. Its vanguard organisms initiated covert strikes, carrying out sabotage and brutal raids that weakened planetary defenses from within. These initial assaults destabilized key worlds, setting the stage for the main swarm's devastating arrival. Beneath the surface, tunneling bioforms slipped through defenses, bypassing the toughest strongholds and attacking from unexpected directions. This multi-pronged assault overwhelmed Imperial forces, forcing strategic withdrawals as humanity struggled to defend vital systems. Lesser worlds were often sacrificed to protect key assets, but even these losses weighed heavily on morale. With each passing battle, the pale flesh and blood-red chitin of Kraken's creatures appeared more frequently throughout the contested zones. Imperial armies found themselves constantly on the back foot, retreating in the face of an enemy that seemed to anticipate every move. In these dire times, several Space Marine chapters distinguished themselves, leading desperate rearguard actions to slow the Tyranid advance and buy precious time for the Imperium to regroup. The courage of the Space Marines was unquestionable, as was their success in halting and wounding the relentless advance of Hive Fleet Kraken. However, their stubborn resistance came at a terrible price. The sides of the Emperor and the Lamenter's chapters suffered grievous losses, pushed nearly to extinction, while the Knights of Eternity were completely annihilated, leaving no survivors. The turning point came when Kraken consolidated its largest tendrils and launched a massive assault on the Hive world of Ichor 4. The reasons behind this sudden shift in the Tyranid strategy remain a mystery, but it provided Imperial commanders a rare opportunity to strike a decisive blow against the alien menace. The battle that followed was brutal and costly. During the fierce and protracted conflict, the Tyranids unleashed new, fearsome bioforms never before seen, including towering biotitans that wrought devastation on the battlefield. Yet it was Chapter Master Marnius Calgar who emerged as the hero of Ichor 4, leading a formidable force of Ultramarines in a strategic defense that ultimately purged the Xenos from the planet and the surrounding space. Though victorious, Ichor 4 was left a desolate ruin. Despite the defeat of Hive Fleet Kraken, numerous splinter fleets and smaller tendrils remained scattered across the galaxy, ensuring the Tyranid threat endured. Meanwhile, the Eldar of Craftworld Iandan had long sensed the coming storm. Their farcers glimpsed the encroaching doom woven in the threads of fate, while their rangers brought back harrowing reports of the swarm's approach. Craftworld Iandan, massive and majestic though it was, lacked the ability for rapid retreat or evacuation. It became clear that avoidance was impossible. The Eldar would have to stand and fight. Farser Kelman, Iandan's most powerful seer, urged the entire population to unite in defense, warning that only total mobilization could offer any hope against Hive Fleet Kraken. With heavy resolve, even the most serene Eldar elders donned armor and took up arms alongside the fierce aspect warriors and formidable war engines. The spirits of the fallen were called forth from the craft world's infinity circuit, bound into spirit stones that animated massive wraithbone constructs to bolster the defense. The craft world's elegant void fleets regrouped, forming a protective ring around Iandan to fend off the inevitable attack. Then the Tyranids arrived. Wave after wave of void-born bioforms swept down in an overwhelming assault, plunging the craft world into a nightmare of relentless violence and desperate resistance. The Eldar warships moved with unmatched elegance and precision, cutting down Tyranid attackers until the void itself was littered with drifting carcasses and pools of ichor. Despite their valor, one by one the graceful vessels succumbed, and soon a massive wave of Tyranids crashed onto the surface of the craft world itself. Inside the crystal domes and winding corridors, the Eldar launched fierce counterattacks whenever the monstrous Xenos breached their defenses. Yet the relentless tide could not be held back. Swarms of thousands of warrior organisms tore through line after line of defense, while cunning predators stalked dimly lit passageways, transforming once beautiful wraithbone halls into nightmarish slaughterhouses. Sacred places were lost in the carnage. The Dome of Crystal Seers, the Forge of Vol's Fury, and the Library of Sighs, all were devastated, along with countless other irreplaceable relics. The death toll climbed relentlessly, until the dead far outnumbered the living defenders of Iandan. Just as hope seemed extinguished, Prince Yerrol and his band of corsairs arrived like a storm. Though exiled from the craft world, Yerrol could not turn away from his homeland in its darkest hour. His arrival sparked a brutal and desperate counteroffensive against the Tyranid Hive ships. With ruthless efficiency, Yerrol's fleet tore apart the Xenos' vessels until none remained. Leading a fierce force wielding the cursed spear of twilight, Prince Yerrol boarded the ravaged craft world itself. He personally slew the monstrous Hive tyrant commanding the invasion swarm, then led the relentless purge that eradicated every remaining warrior organism. Farser Kelman was found dead atop a mountain of Tyranid corpses, a grim testament to the desperate fight. Prince Yerrol earned his people's forgiveness through sacrifice and courage, but even with the invaders defeated, the devastation inflicted by Kraken left Iandan forever scarred. The craft world's slow decline was an enduring legacy of the Tyranid assault. The Third Tyrannic War followed only years after Kraken's defeat. Hive Fleet Leviathan advanced from the galactic plane, marking the largest and most expansive Hive fleet yet encountered. It displayed clear signs of adapting from the failures of Behemoth and Kraken, learning to be more cunning and relentless. Leviathan swarms cast a shadow over the galaxy, threatening all life with widespread devastation. By the time of its assault, the Imperium had already identified numerous smaller Hive fleets as serious threats, but none rivaled the sheer scale and ferocity of Leviathan's onslaught. Several smaller Hive fleets, some fragments of Behemoth or Kraken, and others entirely distinct and uniquely evolved, reacted to Leviathan's arrival in varied ways. Many shifted their courses to join, shelter under, or even exploit Leviathan's overwhelming presence, effectively parasitizing the colossal force. Leviathan swarms were vast beyond measure, its tendrils reaching into every corner of the galaxy. Survivors from the Imperial forces recounted a disturbing increase in psychoanalog warrior organisms within its ranks, indicating a far stronger synaptic network controlling the fleet. This Hive fleet's psychic presence in the warp was oppressive and terrifying, a shadow that blotted out hope. This was the Tyranid threat magnified, a nightmare that pushed whole armies and alien civilizations into desperate retreat. Among the first to confront Leviathan head-on was the relentless Inquisitor Kripman, whose ruthless tactics reflected a grim belief that the ends justified any means. Kripman unleashed wave after wave of extermination strikes against worlds lying in Leviathan's path. His brutal strategy was to sterilize planets, rendering them barren and starving the Tyranid swarm of vital biomass, hoping to blunt its advance. While these scorched earth tactics slowed Leviathan somewhat, they cost the Imperium trillions of lives and sparked outrage even among the most hardened political figures. Kryptman's actions were condemned as heretical, leading to his excommunication from the Imperium's sacred halls. Unbowed, Kryptman then orchestrated a dark gambit, releasing a brood of captured genestealers deep within the Orc Empire of Octarius. Predictably, the synaptic signals from these broodlings attracted a Leviathan tendril, which crashed into the Greenskin Empire, sparking a savage, chaotic war that would draw vast forces into brutal conflict. Kryptman had hoped that the warring Xenos, the Tyranids and the Orcs, would destroy each other, but his calculations proved fatally wrong. Instead, the Greenskins provided the Tyranids with a nearly limitless supply of biomass, fueling the relentless growth of their swarms day by day. Orcs, driven by their love of battle, saw the Tyranid invasion as the greatest fight they had ever faced. Imperial forces caught in the chaos reported seeing ever larger and more savage greenskin warbands, emboldened and thriving amidst the carnage. The brutal conflict within the Octarian Empire soon threatened to overflow into neighboring Imperial sectors. In response, Inquisitor Nasir Sahanson and his allies endeavored to form a defensive perimeter known as the Cordon Impenetrable, aiming to contain the violent clash between the Tyranids and Orcs. Despite their efforts, the containment line was incomplete when the combined Tyranid and Orc forces finally struck, worsening an already desperate situation. This was only one of countless disastrous battlefronts that flared wherever Hive Fleet Leviathan extended its reach. The shrine world of St. Casperlon was turned into a slaughterhouse by the combined assault of tunneling Tyranid horrors and the deadly stealth predator known as Death Leaper. The fall of this holy world proved that even the strongest faith could not shield against the terror emerging from the outer dark. Battlefleet Ultima suffered devastating losses during the Battle of Bloodstar, its commanders realizing too late that the Hive mind had grown cunning in ambush warfare since their last encounter. The Tyranids struck with brutal efficiency, exploiting every weakness in the fleet's defenses. The mighty Forge World Griffin also fell to Leviathan's tendrils, its invaluable technological knowledge consumed by ravenous Tyranid hordes. Likewise, the systems of Pyrehaven, Ninth Gift, Jazimir's Rest, and Abdrala fell silent, their final cries echoing across Segmentum Obscurus and into the core of the Segmentum Solar. Each of these worlds marked another grim testament to the unstoppable spread of Hive Fleet Leviathan and the ever-growing shadow it cast over the Imperium of Man. As the flames of the Third Tyrannic War raged uncontrollably across the galaxy, an even greater catastrophe unfolded. The Great Rift tore the Imperium apart. This massive rupture in the fabric of the warp split the Emperor's domain in two, severing countless worlds from the guiding light of the Astronomicon. Isolated and shrouded in darkness, these lost systems became easy targets for Hive Fleet Leviathan. Even planets still blessed by the Emperor's light were not spared, battered by terrifying demonic incursions, devastating plagues of mutation, and crippling breakdowns in communication and military coordination. Hive Fleet Leviathan exploited this chaos with ruthless precision, striking like a hunting beast amid disoriented and panicked defenders. Yet, the Hive mind's advance was not without challenge. The warp storms and demonic infestations ravaging the galaxy also unleashed forces hostile to the swarm itself. Malevolent warp entities, immune to Tyranid consumption, threatened to starve the Hive Fleet by slaughtering or corrupting its potential prey. Forced to adapt, the Hive mind developed new strategies to contend with these dangers, inadvertently becoming an enemy of chaos in its own brutal way, albeit only to secure its own survival. One of the most decisive and devastating confrontations of the Third Tyrannic War took place in the Baal system. This battle was the climax of a prolonged campaign waged by the Blood Angels, defenders of their Primarch's homeworld, struggling to hold back the relentless advance of Leviathan's tendrils. Initially, the tendrils struck the crypto system, which had been fortified as a shield to protect Baal. Despite these defenses, the system fell under the overwhelming weight of the Tyranid assault. In response, Chapter Master Dante led a desperate and heroic counteroffensive, allegedly supported by mysterious Xenos allies. Though Dante's forces managed to delay the Tyranid advance, they could not stop it. The Tyranids pressed relentlessly onward into the region known as the Red Scar, bearing down upon Baal itself, where the fate of the Blood Angels, and perhaps the Imperium, would be decided. Facing the dire threat to his chapter's very existence, Dante called upon every Blood Angel's successor chapter to rally in defense of Baal. Many answered the call swiftly, including the savage flesh-eaters and even the excommunicated Knights of Blood. Despite the arrival of numerous Imperial fleets, the endless Tyranid swarms surged relentlessly from the depths of space, overwhelming the defenders. The Tyranid invasions battered Baal Prime and its sister world, Baal Secundus, with waves of monstrous creatures. The Blood Angels, having unearthed ancient fortifications built before the Horus Heresy, and their successors entrenched themselves to endure the brutal assault. Hive Fleet Leviathan unleashed its full biological arsenal, spawning abominations and deploying the dreaded Swarm Lord to command its forces. After 19 consecutive assault waves, the defenders were pushed to the brink, exhausted and bloodied. Among the fallen were 5 chapter masters, signaling that the doom of the Blood Angels and their kin was imminent. Then, at the darkest hour, the Great Rift tore through the galaxy, swallowing Leviathan's Hive ships in a storm of warp fury, vanishing without a trace. Yet the battle's end was not yet written. From the rift emerged the demonic Lord Carbander, who led a terrifying invasion of demonic forces, slashing through space marines and Tyranids alike. The Knights of Blood sacrificed everything, allowing Gabriel Seth and the last flesh-eaters to flee the carnage. On Baal itself, the surviving Blood Angels and their allies prepared their final stand. Dante, grievously wounded, engaged the Swarm Lord in a savage duel, ultimately severing its head and turning the tide. As the warp storm subsided and the fires on Baal began to smolder, a new hope appeared in orbit. Ships of the Indomitus Crusade, led by Rabut Gilliman, this relief force launched a decisive drop assault that finally cleared the Tyranid menace from the Blood Angels' shattered homeworld.